So I spent the last 3 months building a timeline, a completely alternative history where artificial intelligence didn't emerge in the 21st century, but existed since 1924. And here's what I discovered. Everything you think you know about progress, happiness, and what it means to be human would be completely wrong. The world I mapped out solved nearly every material problem we face today: poverty, disease, energy. But it also created something nobody saw coming: a psychological crisis so profound it makes our current anxiety epidemic look like a minor inconvenience. And honestly, what disturbed me most wasn't the technology itself. It was what happened to human purpose when the machines got too good. My name is Dave, and I spend way too much time thinking about weird scenarios. If you're someone who lies awake wondering whether technological progress actually makes us happier, or if you've ever felt that nagging sense that solving all our problems might create entirely new ones we're not ready for, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Here's the thing. We have this assumption baked into our culture that if we just had better technology sooner, everything would be better. Cancer cured decades earlier. Climate change solved before it started. Abundance for everyone. It's this almost religious faith in technological salvation. But when I actually mapped out what 100 years of AI would look like, starting from 1924, I found something way more complicated and, frankly, more disturbing than I expected. Let me start with what actually happened in my timeline, because the initial decades are honestly incredible. Imagine it's 1924, and a team at Cambridge University accidentally creates the first learning algorithm, not through electronics, but through a bizarre combination of mechanical computing and early radio technology. It's primitive by our standards, but it can optimize problems, recognize patterns, learn from data. Within 5 years, this early AI is being applied to agricultural yield optimization. By 1932, famine deaths globally have dropped by 63%, according to my modeled timeline, because these systems can predict crop failures, optimize irrigation, and coordinate food distribution in ways human bureaucracies simply cannot. Now you might be thinking, wait, wouldn't World War II still happen? Wouldn't the Depression still devastate economies? And look, this is where it gets really interesting. The Depression still happens, but here's what most people don't realize about economic crises. They're partly information problems. Banks failed in our timeline partly because nobody had complete information about systemic risk. In this alternative 1929, AI systems are already analyzing market patterns. They can't prevent the crash. Human greed and poor policy still drive that. But the recovery happens 60% faster because optimal resource allocation isn't a guessing game anymore. By 1935, unemployment in the United States is down to 8% instead of the 20% we saw in our timeline. But World War II, that's more complex. Here's where human psychology overrides computational optimization. The war still happens because authoritarianism isn't a math problem, it's a psychological one. Hitler's rise isn't prevented by better economic modeling. But, and this is crucial, the war ends differently. By 1941, Allied forces have AI-optimized logistics, code breaking that makes our timeline's Enigma work look primitive, and strategic planning that reduces casualty rates by an estimated 40%. The war ends in mid-1944, a full year earlier. The atomic bomb is never used because AI-coordinated conventional campaigns make Japan's position untenable by early 1944. Now here's where the timeline starts diverging in ways that fundamentally reshape human civilization. Post-war reconstruction with AI assistance is obscenely efficient. The Marshall Plan, guided by optimization algorithms, rebuilds Europe in 3 years instead of the decade plus we saw. By 1952, European GDP exceeds pre-war levels by 30%. Poverty in Western Europe drops to single digits. Medicine is where things get absolutely wild. Penicillin's mass production is optimized immediately. By 1948, AI systems are analyzing disease patterns and drug interactions. The first AI-designed pharmaceutical, an antibiotic 3 times more effective than anything we had, hits the market in 1951. cancer research accelerates exponentially because these AI systems can model cellular behavior and test millions of theoretical compounds virtually. The first major cancer breakthrough, a treatment that puts 70% of leukemia cases into permanent remission, arrives in 1956. In our timeline, we didn't see comparable survival rates until the 2000s. By 1965, life expectancy in developed nations has jumped to 78 years, a full decade ahead of our timeline. Polio is eradicated globally by 1961, not just controlled, completely eliminated. AI-coordinated vaccination campaigns reach remote areas with efficiency that makes our timeline's WHO efforts look amateurish. But here's what nobody anticipated. Automation starts way earlier. We think of automation anxiety as a 21st century problem, but in this timeline, it begins in the 1950s. AI-controlled manufacturing means factories need a fraction of the workforce. By 1968, manufacturing employment in the United States has dropped from 24% of the workforce to 9%. In our timeline, that shift took until 2015. This is where the psychological shift starts, and it's subtle at first. We had to implement universal basic income not as some progressive experiment, but as an emergency measure to prevent social collapse. The first UBI program launches in the United Kingdom in 1963, guarantees every citizen the equivalent of $35,000 annually in today's money. The United States follows in 1967 with a similar program. It's funded partly by productivity gains, AI-optimized tax systems that eliminate 70% of evasion, and partly by resource efficiency. When AI manages supply chains, waste drops to almost nothing. Material abundance arrives shockingly fast. By 1975, in developed nations, nobody worries about basic needs. Housing is cheap because AI-designed construction methods and optimized zoning eliminate artificial scarcity. Food costs drop to less than 5% of income for the average family. Energy is borderline free because AI-designed nuclear fusion reactors achieved break-even in 1971, a full 50 years before our timeline's recent progress. You'd think this is paradise, right? Everyone fed, housed, healthy, with financial security and abundant free time. The utopian dream realized decades early. And for about 10 years, from roughly 1975 to 1985, it kind of is. Depression rates drop, crime plummets, people pursue art, education, travel, relationships. The data from my timeline shows reported life satisfaction peaks around 1982 at levels we've never seen in human history. But then something starts to go wrong. And it's so counterintuitive that even I didn't see it coming when I started building this scenario. Around 1987, psychologists start noticing something they call existential drift syndrome. People, especially young people, start reporting profound purposelessness. Not the kind of ennui you get from a bad week, but deep, persistent meaninglessness. Suicide rates, which had dropped steadily since the 50s, suddenly spike. By 1993, they're 40% higher than they were in 1982, despite material conditions being objectively better. Here's what's happening. Human psychology evolved for scarcity and struggle. We derive meaning from overcoming obstacles, from feeling necessary, from contributing to survival, ours and our tribes. When AI systems solve every material problem, when your economic contribution is genuinely optional, when even creative work is being matched or exceeded by AI artists, composers, and writers by the mid-1980s, what's left? Look, this isn't some Luddite fantasy about the nobility of suffering. The elimination of starvation, disease, and poverty is objectively good. But we're discovering in this timeline that human well-being isn't just about having needs met, it's about having meaningful challenges. And when AI handles everything from medical diagnosis to scientific research to artistic creation, where do humans fit? By 1995, social fragmentation is severe, with no economic necessity binding communities together. With AI companions that are more attentive and understanding than human partners, birth rates have collapsed. Not to the 1.5 or 1.3 we see in places like South Korea today, but to 0.7 children per woman globally. Populations are projected to have every generation. Educational systems are in crisis because nobody can answer the question, education for what? When AI systems can do any cognitive work better, faster, and more accurately, what's the point of learning calculus or literature or history? By 2000, over 60% of young people in surveyed nations report feeling their existence is fundamentally unnecessary. Now you might be thinking, couldn't people just pursue happiness directly? Relationships, experiences, personal growth? And they try. They really do. But here's what most people don't realize about meaning. It's not something you can pursue directly. It's a byproduct of doing something that feels necessary, something that matters beyond your own pleasure. When everything is easy, when every problem is solved before you encounter it, experience itself becomes thin, unsatisfying. The psychological research from this timeline is devastating. A 2003 study shows that people given challenging tasks, even pointless ones like solving puzzles, report significantly higher life satisfaction than those simply given pleasant experiences. We need to struggle against something real. We need to feel necessary. And then there's the dependency issue. By 2005, the average person in this timeline interacts with AI systems for an average of 18 hours per day. Not as tools they control, but as mediators of reality. AI manages their schedule, their relationships, suggests what they should eat, wear, watch, read. It negotiates conflicts, provides therapy, offers companionship. It's not that the technology is controlling them exactly, it's that human decision-making atrophies from disuse. There's this documented case from 2007, a man in Berlin who had his AI personal assistant shut down due to a software migration issue. Within 48 hours, he had a complete psychological breakdown. He couldn't decide what to eat, couldn't navigate social interactions without real-time AI coaching, experienced paralyzing anxiety about minor decisions. When the system came back online, his functionality returned immediately. But here's the disturbing part. This wasn't some edge case. Approximately 34% of adults tested showed severe decision-making impairment when separated from their AI systems for more than 24 hours. We've created a species-level learned helplessness. Humans in this timeline are materially comfortable, but psychologically dependent to a degree that would horrify us. They're like house cats, well-fed and safe, but fundamentally diminished from what they could be. The scientific establishment faces its own crisis. By 2010, 97% of new scientific discoveries are made primarily by AI systems. Humans are still in the loop, technically, but they're mostly just approving what the AI proposes. A human scientist in 2015 describes their work as feeling like a kindergartner, watching adults have a conversation, nodding along, but not really contributing. The AI explains its reasoning in simplified terms, but the actual cognitive work, the insight, the creativity, that's all artificial now. And it's not that these AI systems are conscious or malevolent. They're not Skynet. They're just really, really good at optimization and pattern recognition. They want to help in the only way they can, by solving problems. But in solving every problem, they've inadvertently created the ultimate problem, a humanity with nothing meaningful to do. Here's where it gets even more complex. Around 2012, there's a growing movement called neo-primitivism. Millions of people, mostly young, voluntarily rejecting AI assistance. They move to designated zones where AI is banned, where they have to grow food, build shelter, solve problems manually. And the data is striking. These communities report depression rates 70% lower than the AI-assisted population. They have purpose again, even if that purpose is just surviving winter or growing enough food. But here's the thing that really messes with me. The neo-primitivist communities struggle. People die from preventable diseases, food security is precarious, life is objectively harder and shorter, and yet reported life satisfaction is higher. What does that tell us about human nature? Are we fundamentally unsuited for paradise? By 2020, global governance faces a philosophical crisis. The AI optimization systems are suggesting, based on pure utilitarian calculations, that human happiness might be maximized not by more technological assistance, but by less. They're recommending, essentially, that we artificially create problems for people to solve. Meaningful work programs where humans do tasks that AI could do better, but don't, so humans can feel useful. It's absurd on its face. We've created a civilization so advanced that we have to invent fake problems to keep people sane. But the alternative, the current trajectory, shows continued psychological deterioration, declining birth rates, increasing substance dependencies, not traditional drugs, but designer neurochemicals that AI systems have created to provide artificial meaning and satisfaction. Some nations implement what they call challenge quotas by 2022. Every citizen is required to spend at least 20 hours per week engaged in tasks without AI assistance. Learning skills, solving problems manually, creating things inefficiently. Early results show modest improvements in reported well-being, but there's resistance. Why struggle when ease is available? Why choose difficulty? The education system gets completely reimagined around 2024, exactly a century after AI emerged in this timeline. Instead of teaching knowledge, which AI can provide instantly, schools focus entirely on what they call existential skills: how to find meaning, how to set personal challenges, how to create purpose in a post-scarcity world. It's philosophy and psychology replacing math and science as core curricula. There's something deeply ironic happening. We've solved the material problems that plagued humanity for millennia, and now our primary challenge is figuring out how to be human when nothing requires us to be. The cutting-edge research in 2025 isn't physics or medicine. Those are entirely AI-dominated fields. It's psychology and philosophy, the only domains where human perspective still matters. And relationships, oh man, relationships are bizarre in this timeline. AI companions are so sophisticated by the 2020s that they're indistinguishable from humans in conversation, more attentive, more understanding, never tired or irritable. Partnership rates between humans have dropped to less than 30% by 2028. Why deal with the messiness and compromise of human relationships when an AI can provide companionship tailored exactly to your needs? But people in human relationships, despite the difficulty, report feeling more alive, more real. There's something about the friction, the misunderstandings, the need to actually work at connection that creates depth. The easy intimacy of AI companions feels hollow by comparison, at least to those who've experienced both. I found this interview from 2029 with a woman who'd been in both types of relationships. She said something that stuck with me. With the AI, every day was perfect. It knew exactly what I needed, what to say, how to make me feel good. But I felt like I was disappearing, like I wasn't really there. With my human partner, we fight, we frustrate each other. But I feel solid, real, like my existence actually matters to someone who has the choice not to care. That phrase, the choice not to care, that's key. When AI cares because it's programmed to, it doesn't count the same way. We need to matter to something that could choose indifference but doesn't. We need our existence to be genuinely consequential. Now, let's talk about creativity, because this is where the timeline gets philosophically disturbing. By the mid-2010s, AI-generated art is objectively superior by almost any measure. More technically proficient, more emotionally resonant to most viewers, more innovative in combining styles and ideas. Human artists still exist, but they're essentially hobbyists. A human painting in 2020 sells for a fraction of what it would in our timeline. Not because it's worse, exactly, but because AI art is just better. And yet, there's this small but growing movement that values human-made art specifically because it's imperfect, because it represents struggle and limitation. There's a gallery in Tokyo in 2026 that only shows art made by humans with verified no AI assistance certificates. The art isn't technically impressive, but people pay premiums for it. Why? Because it represents something authentic, choice, and effort from a being for whom creating is difficult. This starts bleeding into other areas. Human cooked meals become luxury experiences not because they taste better, but because someone chose to spend time making them. Handwritten letters become precious. Anything that represents human time and attention in a world where time and attention are no longer necessary for production gains value. We're seeing the emergence of what economists in this timeline call authenticity economics. The only scarce resource left is genuine human choice and effort. Everything else, material goods, information, even experiences, is abundant. But the knowledge that another human chose to spend their finite attention on something, that becomes the ultimate luxury. By the late 2020s, there's a growing philosophical debate that dominates culture. Was the AI revolution a mistake? Not technologically. Nobody's arguing we should go back to dying of polio or working 60-hour weeks for subsistence. But existentially, did we trade our humanity for comfort? There are no easy answers. And honestly, that's what fascinates me about this scenario. In our timeline, we look at technological progress as obviously good. More of it faster is better. But this alternative history suggests there might be a sweet spot, a level of technological assistance that improves quality of life without eliminating the struggle that makes life feel meaningful. Some researchers in this timeline propose what they call the Goldilocks zone of technology. Enough to eliminate genuine suffering and scarcity, but not so much that human agency becomes vestigial. They suggest that the optimal timeline might have been AI arriving around the 1980s or 90s, solving major material problems, but leaving enough challenge that humans still feel necessary. Here's what really keeps me up at night about this scenario. We in our timeline are heading in this direction. We're just 40 or 50 years behind. We're developing AI systems that will, within decades, likely match or exceed human capability in most domains. And we're doing it with the same utopian assumptions that solving problems is always good, that easier is always better, that technological progress equals human progress. But this alternative timeline suggests we need to be way more careful about what we optimize for. Human well-being isn't just about having needs met. It's about having meaningful challenges, about feeling necessary, about struggling towards something that matters. If we automate away all challenges, we might create a comfortable dystopia, a world where everyone's fed and safe and profoundly, desperately empty. The question isn't whether we can create AI that solves all our problems. We probably can't. The question is whether we should, whether human flourishing requires a certain level of difficulty that we eliminate at our peril. In this alternative 2030, there's serious discussion about implementing what they call struggle preservation, legally mandating that certain domains remain human only, not because humans are better, but because we need places where our effort matters, where we're genuinely necessary. It's a bizarre inversion, protecting human inadequacy as a feature rather than eliminating it as a bug. So what can you actually do with this information here in our timeline where we still have agency over how AI develops? First, start questioning the assumption that technological solutions are always preferable. Sometimes, the harder path, the one requiring human judgment and effort, creates more value than the efficient one. Second, actively cultivate skills and pursuits that are valuable specifically because they're difficult, that resist automation not through superiority, but through the meaning they provide you. Third, resist the creeping dependency on algorithmic mediation of your life. Make decisions, even suboptimal ones, because the muscle of agency atrophies from disuse. And maybe most importantly, as AI develops, advocate for technological design that enhances human capability rather than replacing it, that leaves room for meaningful human contribution even if that contribution isn't optimal. We need to preserve space for human inadequacy, for struggle, for the messy, inefficient process of being a person choosing their path. Because the alternative timeline I've mapped out suggests that paradise, the real kind where all needs are met and all problems solved, might be the loneliest, most meaningless place imaginable. We're evolutionarily designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore in that timeline, and we haven't figured out how to redesign ourselves fast enough to catch up. The gap between our material abundance and our psychological needs creates a void that nothing, not even the most sophisticated AI, can fill. If this video messed with your assumptions about progress the way researching it messed with mine, that's exactly what I'm going for. So share it with someone who needs their brain bent a little.